What induced the move to Big Bear for you?
Well, it's been a bit of a transition, of course, with COVID coming and things kind of falling apart in a sense. But to me, it was almost like a moment of clarity to step back and make a decision to fully pursue what I'm doing. Because in the past few years, running has been kind of I was juggling running and training among other things. I've been a yoga instructor, hiking guide at this retreat in Malibu called the Ashram for several years. And so, coming to this intersection last year, it was the moment where I realized that it was an opportunity for me to fully dive in and give 100% focus to the craft.
Yeah. So you, back in your maybe late teens, early 20s time frame, early 20s, you were like 195 pounds, a couple hundred pounds.
Yeah, I was definitely heavy. I was almost 200 pounds, kind of big, beefy gym guy. And when then in 2007 I came to the US. Eventually, I reshaped myself a little bit because I got scouted by a modeling agent the moment I landed in South Beach, and pretty much started trimming down a bit there to fit in clothes and a little more fit, a little more sharp, let's say.
Yeah.
And then, of course, a few years later, that transformation continued to kind of, it brought me to a slimmer and slimmer version of myself. And, right now I'm pretty much racing at about 150, 155 pounds. So that's a big transformation there.
What was the reasoning for becoming a three quarters the size of your previous self? Was that just a natural progression, or like how did that happen?
Well, it kind of happened because of, the direction in life that I took, the lifestyle kind of, before it was very much driven by just aesthetics, just being a gym guy, was putting in pounds, but still lean, it was just like buff. Then, of course, going into modeling, I had to fit certain sizes of clothing, and that brought to that second transition. And then eventually, pursuing running, long distance running, the least amount of weight you have on your shoulders, the faster you can go.
Yeah.
And so it all kind of happened very naturally. It wasn't forced. Of course, it was challenging many times because, you kind of have to reassess your body needs and all of that. But I also found it to be a very let's say exciting process because it's very much about self exploration in many ways, and finding out that you can adapt your body to pretty much whatever you desire. So there's really no one thing set. You can transform yourself.
When you were modeling, were you getting into like drugs and partying, and was there any like addiction? Because I know that's a very common thing with ultra athletes in general. Is oftentimes there's like the analogy of like running away from something. You just keep on running,
Yeah,
like far as
yeah.
just
Oh,
never stop.
absolutely, absolutely. That was I would say that was the rising fun part of it at the beginning, and then the downfall negative side of it at the end. And I say it as a beginning of an end because it was very much like a small journey in itself, kind of getting introduced to this new industry, this new lifestyle, this new environment, down in South Beach, then, traveling around Milan, New York, all of these big cities. And, because of your status of whatever you represented, at whatever I represented at the time, everything was kind of handed out. People wanted you here, people wanted you there. When you're 24, 25, 26, and you're living that lifestyle, you kind of feel like the king of the world until the bill is presented, and then you realize the downside of it. And so that kind of almost started crumbling down until I realized that I could endure that type of life. I could endure that lifestyle. And it brought me to a major breaking point where I confronted myself and I realized that I needed to make a change in what I was doing, the direction that I took. And so that kind of brought to that process of, in a way, self-discovery and, introspection to find out what truly called me. And so, that eventually I discovered long distance running.
It seems. Are you familiar with Sanjay Rawal? I had him on the podcast a while back.
No.
He did a documentary called 3100 Run and Become, which I'm sure you'd be really
Oh,
interested
yes,
by.
yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, he's
Yes.
super sweet. I really appreciate him a lot. But he is very much in the spiritual
Yeah.
connection, transcendence through putting in miles,
Yep.
and that relationship of running just being essentially like another medium or path towards some deeper self-actualization. And it's kind of like
Absolutely.
a long race is kind of like a metaphor for one's entire life
For
kind of
sure.
kind
You
of
can
thing.
squeeze in a whole life, like at least a year worth of emotions in one day of racing.
Hmm.
And I do agree in the fact that ultra running allows you to really connect within yourself. It's just a means in a way, but it's just like just like yoga or other activities that push the body to its let's say breaking point, or at least a moment of discomfort,
Yeah, or
because it's
boundaries.
only what's that.
Boundaries, maybe.
Yep, the boundaries, the boundaries of comfort. Because only when you go over that boundary, you begin to transcend the physical body, and you begin to connect at a deeper level. First through the mind, and then eventually breaking down the mind, you ascend to something higher, to that to that deeper consciousness. And that's why I think this type of races are so they're so unique and special experiences, because it's not just a physical challenge. It becomes something greater, and doesn't matter how hard it gets, we just keep going back for more.
Hmm. Do you have at this point? I'm sure you've approached many self-perceived limitations or boundaries, and
Yeah.
been in that kind of negotiation phase of quit or keep going.
Yeah.
Is that something that you're pretty savvy with, that conversation at this point, or like being in that place?
You kind of know, through time and uh, experiences that you live, you understand kind of the fluctuations and how the game works, but it's never owned.
Hmm.
Let's say that way. It's a constant process of reestablishing that belief and discovering what you're capable of. In those moments, you've been through it, you've done it, you know how to come out, but every single time it becomes an experience on its own. So it's never given. That's what I
Hmm.
mean. It's almost like when people nowadays that they talk about saying they're woke. It's just because you say that, it shows the opposite. Uh, for the fact that the understanding of awakening is that you are awakening to a higher understanding, and tapping into the higher understanding allows you to understand that it's a never owned process. Even the highest guru, even the most experienced mind and soul will always have more to find out and discover. And so it's just about that. You just put yourself out there and see what happens.
Yeah. So I learned about you when you had beat, maybe beat's not the best word, but you ran a faster time than the infamous, or maybe just famous, David Goggins.
Right, last year, yeah.
What did you think of all those headlines? Because it was very defaming of Goggins. It was very like you were like the David Goggins slayer kind of thing. And I was saying, and I was like, from like a PR perspective, I'm like, oh, this
Oh,
is
it was
great. Like,
awesome, yeah.
yeah, this is good for
i
him. But
got i got tens of thousands of followers overnight.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So how did you were you like, yeah, F yeah, I'm the Goggins slayer, or what? Like,
Yeah,
how was that
right.
for you?
Well, it was entertaining at the beginning until it became annoying, for the fact that you know it kind of hit the higher exposure, for the fact that he has a big following.
Yeah.
And I've received a lot of negative messages from his followers,
Hmm.
and that wasn't that fun. Also, because I was very, very, we had a little, let's say, misunderstanding during the race. We're two completely different people. We have very different very, very different mindsets, very different approaches to what we do. And, I was looking forward to a shared experience to kind of help and push each other out throughout the whole thing. But, he wasn't seeing the same thing eye to eye. And so whatever happened, happened. But, it was almost like a contrast of seeing people in the community kind of supporting me and people outside the community supporting him. And for the fact that, in many ways, he's very popular on a broader level, but is not very respected is not the word, but is not, it doesn't have the same, let's say, value inside the community. It's not looked after as one of the top athletes.
Why would that be?
Because of his approach, I would say. I think ultra running is a of course is a, you're running by yourself. It's very much a personal one person type of experience, but there's some sort of shared understanding, shared journey. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of support among the people. And he was there talking about taking souls while passing people. And I think that's kind of the opposite of what ultra running is about. You're not taking anyone's soul. You're sharing the journey, because we're all going through the same highs and lows, through the same difficulties. And once you reach the finish line, whether you're first or last, we're all winners. And that's the beauty of it. It's not you taking souls or beating other people, because that's just limiting to to what it is. I think it doesn't express fully what the sport is about.
It's kind of like a zero-sum approach to ultra racing.
Yeah.
Like by me consuming
Yeah.
your morale,
Yeah.
boosts my morale, and then that also is something that happens. I've had that experience with any type of, anytime there's a contender of some sort, which then that comes to what is a contender actually, and perhaps we're all this on the same team in this thing together. But it is an interesting thing that does happen where it seems like, you see this maybe like UFC. Someone, if you get punched in the face really hard and someone really rings you, or boxing or whatever, the last thing you want to do is let them know that you've been rung.
Right.
Because there is this almost energetic,
taking
conversion
over
of energy. There's like a transactional experience there where it's like, okay, like I got you. I was kind of feeling a little off, and now suddenly you're off, and it's almost like the amount that you're now off, I've now gained.
I get
which is interesting.
Yeah, totally. I think in ultra running there, of course, if you're racing to compete, of course you want to be the other person. But to me, it almost became, I don't know, the way it just came off, it was confusing. And so that's why we received a lot of, emails and messages and comments, and people like just pouring out. Can I say crap?
Vitriol would be a fancy way.
Yeah,
of saying
it's just
shit.
Exactly. They poured out a lot of that without even knowing what it is about, And so, it was what it was. I'm happy that in a way I came out on top, because of course, we're still racing, but if we ended up sharing more, I think we would have been able to propel each other to even better performances.
Yeah. So how would you define the difference in your approach to Goggins' approach? Not that one is wrong or right, but they're clearly different. What would the difference be?
Well, I think that the one main difference is the fact that he exasperates the power of the mind. And I respect that, because ultimately it comes down to controlling the negative thoughts that the mind constantly throws on you. When you're doing this type of races, as I was saying earlier, it becomes almost like a spiritual journey, because you're crumbling, you're crushing your physical, eventually your mental, to achieve that sense of presence and consciousness that allows you to tap into a higher energy, almost an infinite type of energy. You're no longer restricted by the mind or confined by the mind. You open up to the heart, to the spirit, to the soul, which is eventually the true force behind who we are and what we do. And I think that, it's almost the same idea of being guided by by the ego or by something greater than yourself. And so here, it's not about, again, the difference that I can say is not necessarily about showing off and telling you that I can do these things because I'm the toughest, because I take no days off and I'm flexing and I'm acting all tough. If you are conscious of your strength, you don't need to over exasperate it on other people and put it on show. You're showcasing it. It's almost like, a true master doesn't need to show off his skills, just like a true teacher does. It's a very fine line right there. But the one key component is the fact that I believe that once you are defined and driven by the mind, you are on a path of resistance, because yes, you're going to have a strong mind to achieve whatever you want to do, but you're always going to be restrained by that constant battle of battling through the mind, through the perceived limitation, through the whatever it is in that moment. If you understand that the mind is just a tool and not the driving force, then you can use it to achieve whatever you want. There's a very famous saying, the mind is a great servant, but a terrible master. Yeah. And so that really speaks about these type of experiences, because again, if you use the mind to do something extraordinary, you're always going to be fighting the mind, because it's always going to choose and pick the easy way out. It's an evolutionary pattern. So it's something that we can, extend a little bit, that point of, let's say the stamina of it, the breaking point of the mind. You can enhance it, you can expand it, but you're still going to be confined by it. That's why all the spiritual teachings, they talk about transcending the mind and tapping into the higher self, tapping into the higher power. And I believe that once you allow yourself to go through it, transcend the physical, transcend the body, transcend the mind, then eventually you are, I don't know, it's almost like it's a magical moment where everything, you kind of shut everything off. You're not thinking about the position, you're not thinking about the time, you're not thinking about what's going to happen if I win, what's going to happen if I lose, those are all mind restraints. Those are all things that keep us bounded. Because again, you're not allowed, if you're wrapped up in all of these conceptions, you don't allow yourself to be fully present, fully involved, fully focused, giving your all in the present moment, because ultimately that's all we can control. The thought of the past and the worries of the future, they're just throwing us off balance. It's pretty much the same concept of meditation. It's about bringing the focus to the present moment, being aligned, finding the balance, the center that allows you to perform, to be who you are, do what you need to do at your very best, and not bounded by the perceived limitation or perceived pain that you're experiencing in that moment, because that's all out of our control. I cannot plan ahead of what's going to happen 100 kilometers from now. All I can do is give my very best right now and deal with whatever comes at me right now. Because if I do give my very best at every single step, eventually the sum of all of these will allow me to reach the finish line.
Yeah. And then within that, I think oftentimes around like more like metaphysical, spiritual type conversations, I think that the journey towards just the journey, because maybe there's no arrival,
right,
oftentimes can become kind of poeticized and romanticized, and after the fact you put a tuxedo on it, and you have the conversation, you're like, oh wow, man, that just felt spiritual.
Yeah.
Like, wow. And then the reality is, I think it's just dramatically dirtier than that.
Oh, for sure. Sure. It is, it gets ugly before it gets better. And you have to, that's why it's always, I think the societal trend is taking us away from these, from achieving, or at least working on ourselves and tapping into our higher consciousness. It's because everything is comfortable, everything is given, everything is here, And at a click of your fingers, you can get and do whatever you want. There's no struggle. And growth, both physical, mental, and spiritual, only happens to struggle. We know that. Change, evolution only happens in moment of distress, in moment where there is the need to tap into something bigger, because what's going on right now, that just doesn't work. It's just like a muscle. If you're lifting 1 pound, you're going to be sticking to that 1 pound and you're comfortable doing 1 pound. If you're pushing 10, 20, 100, you're going to feel it. But that process, though painful, uncomfortable, difficult, challenging, whatever it's going to be, that's the part that is going to allow you to transform and reach a better self. Let's say that. I keep on saying a higher understanding of who you are, because again, in comfort, there's never going to be growth. And if you put yourself out there, break through those barriers, you are in the process of understanding how strong you actually are. The possibilities that are ahead of you are infinite, but you need to take that step out of the comfort zone and see how strong you are, how smart you are, how talented you are, or whatever it is that your heart calls and your heart is called towards. And so it's very much like a counter trend about where the society is going. Everything is very materialistic. Everything is about egocentric, very egocentric and ego driven. And I think these type of experiences that can be running very long distances or climbing or biking or kayaking or something that puts you outside your comfort zone, that allows you to connect with nature, those are all things that truly open up your understanding and the concept of connection, not just within, but without too.
I'm coming back to this race particularly just because everything's a microcosm for everything
It
else.
was fun.
So it's like, why not just keep going to that as, a broad, to connect to a broader conversation.
Yeah.
But during that, did you start off ahead? Did he start off ahead? Did you guys go back and forth? Was there a clear, and then within that, like, tandem question is, did you have moments of your own ego coming in being like, got you, bitch? Or was it fully spiritual, transcendent, love is all, crystals, kundalini?
So I started off, very much focused on the race itself and not thinking about other people. The Moab 240 is 240 miles. So we're talking about almost 400 kilometers. That's about almost 10 marathons in a row.
Over how much time is it?
Well, you have up to 6 days, but I did it in 2.5.
Jesus.
60 hours.
And what's like the average?
60 to 100 and 110, 120. 60 to 120, let's say.
Wow.
So the first ones usually come in about 60 hours. And then, over the rest of, a couple of days, all the rest of the group comes in.
How many hours were you again? Sorry.
60 hours flat. So it's 2 days and a half exactly.
Okay. Wow.
And so what happens is, you cannot think about competition in a race like that, at least not at the beginning. It's not worthwhile, and it just disrupts you from what I was talking about earlier. We are, let's say, 20 miles into this race, and knowing that we have another 220, it's mind-boggling. So you cannot really think about, I'm in first position, third position, fifth position. It doesn't matter anything at that moment. So to me, it started out as just being focused on what I needed to do. And I started off in the front. And after about 30, 40 miles, actually almost 50 miles, we were in the middle of those big desert valleys that you could see tens of miles back and forth. And so, it started getting dark, and I was by myself at that moment. And, I was looking back a couple of times to see what the gaps could have been. And eventually I saw that one dim light in the distance. And so I was like, maybe there's only 10, 15 minutes difference. Might as well slow down, because it's, 50 miles in. Think about it, we still have 190 miles.
Crazy.
That's crazy, right? And so I was like, might as well right now slow down a little bit, team up. We're going into the night instead of going by myself. Better to go with somebody. I didn't know who that was, but eventually, moments later, Goggins showed out of the dark, and we started chatting it out for a minute. He wasn't very talkative, and I was like, all right, I respect that. And so we just kind of kept going, neck to neck, literally. It was fun because miles when you're in company pass by much faster
Right.
because you're keeping the pace, you're helping each other out. There's it's easier to keep track because you don't need to be as focused because if you miss one ribbon, there's the other person that might have gotten it, stuff like that. And so we got to this point about mile 70, 75 where I was very comfortable. I was very, very comfortable in sticking with him. And so we started going through this technical section where he started going on little walk and run patterns. So walk certain steep sections, run the rest, walk a little, hike and walk, hike and run. And I guess he got pissed for the fact that I was, sticking with him. Like he was running, I was running, he was walking, I was walking. And I was like, he would start running, I would start running, he would start walking, I would start walking. And I was like, we're just going together. I'm not expecting to put on a surge and drop you off here. We still have 180 miles to go, again, 160 miles to go, whatever it was. And so I was very comfortable enjoying the time together until he snapped. He just got, I guess, a lot of people saw it as a mischievous tactic of breaking him down, of saying, I got you. But I'm like, it's not like we were playing the last 10, 20 miles of the race that I can play mind games. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We are so far back. We still have so much to do that it really was nothing like that. To me, that moment was simply the opportunity to spend the night together through the darkness of the night instead of being by myself, having somebody in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
And, the possibility to keep up the pace, the possibility to help each other out through the highs and lows that come at different times. So, when one is feeling like crap, the other one can come out and kind of help you through and vice versa. So it's always good in this type of misery loves company. We know that. And so, in those type of moments, it's good to have somebody. That's why in this type of races, after a certain mileage, you're also allowed to have pacers so that you have somebody to kind of help you, guide you throughout this whole thing. Anyway, he snapped. He didn't like it, and he pretty much, told me to
fuck off.
I was trying to find a gentle way to do it, but yes, basically. And so, at that point, I was like, you know what, I'm sorry, we just didn't, we didn't click, and that was pretty much the end of it. So
How did he tell you to fuck off? Did you say fuck off?
Well, he didn't really tell me to fuck off, but he got upset because we were doing this run, stop, walk, run, walk, and I was almost like on the step. I was like, the moment he would start running, I would start running. The moment he would start walking, I would start walking. So I was very much in control. So I think that he couldn't get to me, and I think because he didn't get to me, I got to him. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
So he thought I was playing mind games with him. But to me, there was nothing like that, especially not at the moment. Again, if we were 220 miles into the race and we were at that point, I would have gotten it. I would have gotten in the sense that I understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm playing mind games. It could be it. It could be that because we are very close to the finish line. Maybe getting a 5-10 minutes advantage means I'm going to win.
Well, even if you are, who cares? Isn't it a race?
That's right. But still, but even more, talking about 70, 80 miles into a 240 miles race, we're not even 1/3 of the way. So it's not like this game is going to play to my or your advantage. So anyway, it just, he stopped in his tracks and he kind of flexed towards me and he started like, start running your fucking race. And I'm like, Are you serious, dude? I'm like, I was so thrown off, man. I gotta tell you, like, really thrown off because I'm like, dude, you really have no understanding of, of camaraderie and supporting each other.
Yeah.
You're just out here wanting to prove something to whoever you need to prove something to,
Yeah.
and I'm not out for that. I'm really not a confrontational person. That doesn't mean I'm not competitive. I'm just not confrontational in the sense that we don't see eye to eye, different minds. Okay, you go your way, I go my way. I don't need to make you change your mind.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I'm sorry you see it that way. I was just enjoying the miles together, but you know what? Screw this. And so I just, I picked up my pace, and that's it. I never seen it again.
Do you think you got energy from that exchange? Do you think that because I want to add a thing. Are you familiar with Tim Noakes, Timothy Noakes,
Oh, of
South
course.
African?
Yeah.
So I've had him on here
Oh,
a
wonderful. I got to check it out
while
then.
ago. Yeah, it was a while ago. And a thing that you're already familiar with is the central governor theory,
Yep.
and which is essentially, you guys are like test subjects for this,
Yep.
of feeling like, oh wow, like the mind really does impact the way that we produce our physiology and our neurochemistry.
Totally.
And so I wonder, do you think that there was any type of physiological reaction to that in that moment, that you actually gained energy, or do you think that you don't think about it that much?
At the beginning, I got to tell you the truth. He actually sent me back a little bit
Uh,
because it was a negative interaction.
yeah,
I pretty much tried to focus and draw energy from positivity
yeah,
or create a positive mindset. So that kind of threw me off, and I was like, why wouldn't you want to run together? And I felt like, like in a very naive way, I'm like, why wouldn't you want to run together? It doesn't make sense to me. So I pretty much, I went in that race last minute, in the sense that I had other events, another big event lined up pretty much the month before. That event got canceled because of fire. So I got into Moab last minute. And I'm just saying this for the fact that I didn't have a support crew
yeah,
lined up. So basically, I ran 202 miles completely alone. But that thought, and I'm circling back to the 202 miles because that was a one certain checkpoint at the crack of dawn of the second day where I that's when I got the boost. That's when I got the boost because I was like, okay, I'm 38 miles away. Now it kind of became a game of saying, now when I see how much I can give him,
yeah,
because like I don't want to just beat him now when I beat him by a lot. And so that's when that's when he started clicking. And, at that moment, when I got to 210, 220 miles, I had over 5.5 hours gain on him,
wow,
which is pretty outstanding at that moment. And, but, and then just to circle back and finish the story, that because I was driven by the wrong things, I guess, I wasn't any longer, for that moment, I wasn't any longer connected within. I was focused on the outside. That's when things started falling apart for me. I got hurt,
wow,
and those last 20 miles, I basically hobbled over the canyons and the mesas and whatever it was ahead of us. And it took me forever to finish those 20 miles. And he finished with less than 2 hours, 2 hours gap behind me. So he was actually gaining on me massively towards the end. I was literally limping for the last 20 miles. It took me almost 10 hours. I was on pace to break the course record, but I actually finished 3 hours behind.
that's such an incredible story, and
Yeah.
there's so much metaphor in that, obviously.
Oh, that was a huge learning lesson for me. Huge, huge, huge one.
The thing that comes to mind as you're saying that is, I think, there's been various iterations of this, but considering your enemies essentially to be your allies, because they oftentimes are they're what permits the game.
Yep.
If you don't have that polarization, bad,
Yep.
good, evil,
That's right.
the
Yeah.
light, the dark,
Yep.
that's what polarity is what allows this thing to go. That's relationship, and we
Yep.
have relationship continually throughout, our business, throughout our marital relationships, our family, ourselves.
Yeah.
And one of the metaphors from, it's probably like Alan Watts or something, but it's talking about, uh, you know, in this theater of life, which persona, the term persona actually goes back to being those, the masks that they would wear in Greco or Roman, or maybe
Yeah, yeah,
Greco-Roman
the Greek,
time.
yeah, the Greek,
Yeah.
yeah,
And they were like these these cone masks, these conical masks that would project the sound of your voice, and that was your persona.
right,
And then at the end of the theater, you go backstage, and the villain takes his mask off, and like the protagonist takes their mask off, and all the people, and you're all buds, and you smoke a cigarette, and you go,
right.
whatever, wherever you get a beer, and you're like, cool, we're buds, we talk about the show.
Yeah, but on the stage, it's a different game.
And so it's such an interesting thing to be able to watch that play out, and then be able to reflect on the theater of that race,
Yeah, yeah,
and all the different underpinnings that are happening throughout it.
totally, totally.
It's very cool.
Yeah, it was quite curious and interesting to see how it all developed, and then him reaching out to me after the race and not being happy with what I said and all these things, and a bunch of all of these supporters kind of coming at me telling me that I'm this and this and that.
What is the not to maybe I apologize in advance for saying, but what did you say? What was the thing that pissed his tribe off?
Well, I basically, when I finished the race, I did a few interviews, and a couple of them got, they reached a pretty good
Yeah.
number of people, and so just a bunch of the people that supported him just didn't like what I said, because I expressed pretty much that situation, the one that I just explained to you in a way, not because I wanted to prove that I beat him or whatever. It was just because I came to talk about it because it was a pivotal time in my race.
Yeah.
And so, just like I said, the first 30 miles were great. Then 50 miles in, I had a big crisis, and then ran with him and all these things. And then, that happened. And it's not like I wasn't expressing my side. I was simply stating the facts. I didn't say he's this or that. I just said we were running together. He didn't like what I was doing. He told me to fuck off, and I left. That's pretty much it. So I wasn't, there was no judgment. There was no harshness. There was nothing harsh towards it. It was just a statement. And a lot of people started telling me that I'm evil because I play mind games, because I am this and that. I don't understand Goggins because he's a motivator and he was trying to push me to do my best. And I'm like, I don't need him. I'm way more accomplished than he is. And I don't have anything to prove, and I don't need him to push me while I'm trying to do something completely different. I'm not coming to your house telling you how you should live or teaching you how you should do things. If I'm doing it my own way, you mind about your own things. You know what I mean?
Of course. So when the point where you kind of, it seemed like, got a little bit into your ego, and you're
Yeah.
like, all right, screw this guy, I'm gonna beat him by 5 hours.
Right.
How do you think that attributed to your body starting to break down, both maybe mechanically or maybe even metaphysically, if there is some conversation there?
Because I started getting stupid. I think when you're driven by your ego, you become stupid. You don't see the obvious, because the direction and the choices that you make are driven by the ego, and the ego doesn't care about anything else but himself. And I didn't think about what was going on. I started losing track of my machine. You're the driving. You think about it as you're the driver of this thing, right? You can call it the machine, the body, whatever. You're like the pilot. And if the pilot loses track of let's talk about it, as a Formula One racer. If you don't keep track of how your tires burn out and how they're getting, they're falling apart. If you don't remember to fill up the gas, if you don't remember to do the things that you need to do, you're gonna fall apart. And that's what I did. I started pushing too hard. I started getting wrapped up in the thought of wanting to go faster and faster so I can give it more and more. Threw me off of what I needed to do in that moment, which was taking care of myself, pacing myself, doing what was supposed to be done, instead of going with that, the sheer strength of raw energy works if you're a football player, if you're a 100-meter sprinter. But if you do something that requires consistency, stamina, and focus, then you cannot go all out, clearly.
I would even challenge that though, because if you're in some more like acceleration based sport, you're sprinting or football or whatever it is, it's still an endurance race. Because it's your lifetime that gets you to the point to be able to have
That's true.
that
Yeah.
punctuated poof.
Yeah. Yeah.
So everything is an endurance race.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah. I
And
agree with that.
it's such an interesting thing of starting to kind of get under the hood of our own. Why are we doing anything?
Yeah.
Why do I do this podcast? Why
Yeah.
do I do anything? Why do I work out? Why do I like just asking that questions with every aspect of your life? I think is a relevant thing, because oftentimes if you pull it back enough, you might have this this microcosm example of you and Goggins, just saying
Yeah.
like, oh man, I kind of ran myself into the ground to beat the heck out of this
Yeah.
guy. I
And he
bet you,
backfired.
I bet you a lot of people could say that about maybe their relationship with their dad or their mom or their
Right.
ex, or or whatever the thing is, where they start to destroy themselves
Yeah.
for to get the best of something, and they might not even, it might be a subconscious operating system.
It is. It is. And oftentimes it throws us off ourselves, our balance, and that's when stupid things happen.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not, I think it's the most relevant thing, the why.
Do you have a why? Have you come with? I'm sure, and why is probably much more like aqueous dynamic thing as well.
I think the why is just like everything in life is in constant transformation. It's a constant process of establishing that why. I can kind of circle back to what we were saying at the very beginning when you asked me about, falling into the whole negative downward spiral of drugs and alcohol and all of that coming from that partying lifestyle and scene. Running initially was a way of escaping that. So I don't want to say turning an addiction because I wasn't necessarily a drug addict, but I definitely indulged in that lifestyle. And to me, running became a means to get in touch with myself and rediscover who I am and kind of reset my life in a more positive and empowering way. And then through ultra running, I was able to transform that running away into running towards something. So it became first an escape, then a pursuit. And I think he has a much better sound to it, and it's much more positive when it comes down to approach, mindset, and perspective. Even that, at the beginning, it was very much about checking off bigger and broader challenges. So started out with a certain type of races, and then understanding that I could do this, that I could do that, and then achieving, winning a certain type of event rather than another. And so every single time, every single season, there was the necessity to reassess the why. Though in the past few years, I would say in the last 2, 3 years, that morphed into something even bigger because I am no longer necessarily driven by wanting to win races because I need to establish myself, because I need to get the sponsors so I can do this and do that. But it became very much almost like a life motive. It became almost like a whole lifestyle, a whole approach to it that is driven by the desire, the curiosity to find out what we're truly capable of. We were raised in a society that told us right from the very beginning what we can do and what we cannot do. They put us in a box and they're like, this is your space, this is where you can operate. Don't go over beyond those lines because it's never been done before, because it's dangerous, because this, because of that. But I think we are in the process nowadays of discovering our true potential, physical, mental, spiritual. And so breaking down those barriers and being able to dedicate yourself and your life to it, it's the most inspiring thing that I can think of. It's something that motivates me to get out of bed every day before dawn to push my limits a little further.
Yeah, something that I appreciate about learning more about you as well is you have a pretty dynamic or flexible approach to nutrition throughout the years.
Yeah.
And so it seems like you're pretty resistant to dogma, is what
Yeah, a little bit.
I've gathered, which is so cool. And then the value of maybe temporary
Yeah.
dogma, being able to go inside of confinement,
Yeah.
and strengthen through that confinement and that containment,
Yeah.
and then recognizing at what point does perhaps that confinement and containment start to become suffocating,
Yep.
but not becoming dependent on that containment being whatever maybe a
Yep.
religion, maybe a
Right. Right.
relationship, maybe a nutritional
Yeah.
approach. But I think ultimately people are searching, we're hunting for identity and tribe.
Yeah.
Sometimes it can become sticky, sticky relationships.
It is a sticky situation, let's say, in many ways, at many different levels. For the fact, it's not that I'm necessarily against dogmas, but I'm more against what is commonly accepted. Just because a certain topic is commonly accepted doesn't mean it's the truth. Doesn't mean that it's right. Doesn't mean that it's the right way of doing things or approaching things. So to me, it's about starting from what we know and experiencing for myself to find out where the truth lies. Because let's say, we're talking about laws, we're talking about religion, we're talking about ideas, nutritional, religious, spiritual, whatever we want to talk about it. Those are just accepted concepts, but they're most often far from the actual truth.
Yeah.
And so I think that the true the real exploration nowadays becomes broader. It's really not just about discovering a new land, discovering a physical place, but it's about adventuring in the unknown of all of these concepts that we've taken for granted for centuries and reevaluate them on our own personal experience. Because, first of all, we're all one, but we're all different in the sense that, culturally, different places of the world, we've been raised in different ways, different understandings, different cultural dietary restriction, religious approaches, and all of these things. And so I think that it's only exploring it for ourselves that we can say, this works for me or this doesn't. Yeah. And it's very much a process of self-discovery. It's adventure. even on a nutritional level, it's a culinary adventure, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how you do anything is how you do everything, which I think is interesting to see. It's been interesting, like sociological experiment of sorts, to watch the political happenings over the last 2 years,
right?
Like lockdowns and BLM, and people, the way that people approach a lot of people that you thought you kind of knew, they were like your buddy, and you kind of know them.
Yeah, you showed your colors.
Yeah, you know them at like a good times level.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, cool, like great. We go skating together.
Yeah.
We both like the same, whatever. And then that happens, and it's such an interesting thing to observe in myself, my political leanings and the way that I respond to happenings in the news and whatnot. They really do fall back in like my more like my general operating system of the way that I perceive the world.
Yeah.
And you can kind of tell people's reaction to certain things based off of the way that they process information.
Yeah.
It's just been, I don't think I have a point with that. I apologize.
Oh, no. I'm agreeing with you, because we're living, I would say, in very unique times that are in a way confining a lot of people, and the political parties, the political gap that they created, especially in the last few years, is truly showing the colors of what the society is about right now.
Yeah.
You have certain people that just because they support a certain political parties, they accept these ideas and they fight for their lives for it. And they don't even think about whether it's right or wrong. And I'm not saying red, blue, pink, or yellow. You know what I'm saying? I'm just like, whichever parties, I'm sure everybody have their rights and their motives and reasons why they support whoever they support. But here it's about, again, not taking these things for granted, but I understanding, open up kind of your perspective to what it truly is.
Yeah.
And the truth is out there, but it's often hidden. It's often confined by the societal trend, the perceived limitation that we put on ourselves, and the division that these thoughts create.
Yeah.
We live in a society that enhance separation. We talk about unity, we talk about coming together, but again, look at the societal situation the last 2, 3, 4 years. There's a bigger void that is getting created among people, and that is setting us apart. So it's kind of working towards our greater good.
Yeah, but
And
perhaps I mean, it's I think that with forest fires, the prevention of forest fires can lead to something that's like more cataclysmic. So
right.
like the forest needs to burn.
Yeah.
And if same thing, immune cells in your body. If you were to get microscopic and look at like T cells going through
Yeah.
and killing some, it would be like you might be like like no, like
Yeah,
that.
right. You're fixing this, but you're
Yeah.
creating more problems over
And
there.
so I think within a relationship, and this could draw back to like the that any race, how
Yeah.
it kind of exposes different parts of your personality and such.
Right.
The relationship that people have as a whole in the country, I think you could see, you could look at at the happenings over the last couple of years as being kind of like a little fire,
Yeah.
but not perceiving it as like, oh, this is a bad fire. Perhaps like for the broader relationship, that's maybe temporary againstness that's happening
Right. 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 Right.
or
Maybe are
againstness.
well allowed to
Yeah,
reach something
and so I
else.
think that one of the behind the scenes, like if you draw it back enough, I think one of the most violent things or mantras or ideas is like the whole like good vibes only, and
Yeah. Right.
all there is unicity, all there is sometimes it's like, well, that could perhaps just be putting some other deep-seated issues, just passing them under the rug, passing them under the rug.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Until you cannot hide them anymore.
yeah, so having those little micro explosions where all of a sudden, like, I'm really pissed off at my
Yeah.
neighbor.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Be like, oh, we're separating. It's like, well, maybe this is okay. Like this is all
Yep.
right. It's like showing who we are. I wanted to get into some mechanical
Yep.
aspects of running and such, as well as what's like preparation for you look like physical preparation look like to run a big race.
Well, of course, it requires a great deal of time, energy, commitment, and dedication. It's you can only achieve, or I don't want to say achieve, but work on your endurance with a great deal of patience. It requires a great deal of time over weeks, months, season, years to achieve a certain level of fitness that can allow you to endure or face the type of challenges, long distance challenges.
Yeah.
On an average, I tend to run pretty much all year round. There's only like maybe a month or two out of the year that it drops substantially. Maybe take a whole week or two off and kind of take it easy so that both the body and the mind, more the mind, I would say, need to kind of reset and get a little easy moment where you're not too stressed about, not too much focus on daily grind. You need to get up and you need to go, whether it's hailing, storming, raining, snowing, whatever is going on. Whether you're tired, it's a it's a constant work of of bettering yourself, and that, of course, it's part of the lifestyle that I chose. So I enjoy getting out there. When I think about training, I don't think about, oh, I need to get out there. I have to get out there and run for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. But it's more like, now I get to go out there. I get to enjoy what I do and experience myself and train out there in nature. So it's very much like accepting the process, as if it becomes part of your lifestyle, is no longer a drag.
Yeah.
But of course, there are days that when you put it in 100, 120, 140 miles a week, that you need to kind of convince yourself to get out of the door and knock out that 15, 20 miler on a Tuesday morning. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Are you thinking about any specific like physical preparedness? You're looking at like outside of metabolically speaking, but like ankle function, knees, hips,
Yeah.
spine, shoulders? Like, is there anything like that you're looking at, or is it kind of
I used to when I first started,
yeah,
just thinking of my biomechanics,
yeah,
thinking about my running economy, all of these things. Nowadays, I be honest with you, I don't. It's just become,
right,
after so many years, it almost becomes like you don't need to. I don't know. It becomes natural.
yeah,
It's like you don't need to think about how you walk when you walk. You just walk, and then of course you can perfect a movement, but once your biomechanics are aligned, then it's just a process of developing your cardiovascular, your VO2, your aerobic base, all these little things, and kind of more than you can adapt the body as much as you want, but I think the training also needs to tap into the mind.
yeah,
So it's about preparing the mind to the task ahead. So even when you don't feel like getting out there, you don't feel like training, you have a long run, and those are the most important days. Those are the days that teach you to still run on broken legs, that still allow you to tap into the higher energy to make it through a 3, 4, 5 hours training run. So it really becomes a mental adaptation to the
mhm.
effort and the time that you're going to be spending on your feet.
So is the training of the mind just getting in the habit of going out and doing things that even when you're getting every signal
Even
to
when
not to
you don't
do
want
it,
to
or like
do
that?
it.
So what more maybe not more specifically, if there is more specifics, like what does training the mind look like?
Train of mind means, in my opinion, fighting that mental restraints. Because again, it's the mind that tells you you're tired. It's the mind that tells you you don't feel like going out. It's the mind that tells you, oh, you can stay here in bed today and just snooze the alarm and turn the other way, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's the bigger motivation or whatever inspires you to do to go out there and do what you need to do that eventually will get you off the couch, out of the bed, and putting yourself. It's really about accepting the uncomfortable. Again, we're circling back to what we were saying earlier about the growth happen in uncomfortable moments,
Yeah.
in difficult moments. And so training the mind is about training to control that need to not do what you need to do.
Yeah.
If it makes sense.
Yeah. What about, and we'll wrap up soon, but I want to kind of touch
Yeah.
on some of the like the nuts and bolts aspects
Yeah.
of running long races as well. So nutritionally, you went from kind of eating, it seems like more like bodybuilder type stuff, to it
Right.
seems like kind of like starving yourself with modeling.
Yep.
Probably not starving yourself, but maybe something along those lines. To
Close. Yeah.
plant based, to vegetarian, to vegan, to eating lots of plants while also integrating eggs and then
Yep.
fish and then
Yep.
meat and organ meat.
Yeah,
Is
you
that where
got
kind
it.
of where you're at now?
So yeah, it's definitely been a pretty amazing process. I gotta tell you, because again, I started out like most people eating pretty much everything, and then slowly throughout the years, I started taking almost like a process of trial and error, bringing in things, taking things out, trying and see what worked best for me, and I slowly lined up towards a pretty much fully plant-based diet. In the past few years, I've been drifting towards, yeah, vegetarian, fully vegetarian, then fully vegan for almost 2 years. And despite the fact that I still very much plant based, and I went into veganism for ethical reasons more than the health reasons. I had to kind of take a step back. I reintroduced eggs, I reintroduced honey, and eventual sushi, salmon, whatever it is. So I'm pretty much there right now. And the only reason why I brought back eggs and some salmon every now and then is because not much about proteins, but there's a certain type of fats
Sure.
that you just cannot get in plants.
Yeah.
You can get really good fat from oil. You can get it from seeds, from nuts, from avocados, stuff like that. But it's the quality of that fat that is different from, I go to salmon because it's the fattest, juiciest fish that you can find. And that really works wonders when you talk about long distance. Long distance bodies, metabolically do not burn glycogen, they burn fats. And so the better the fats, the more fat adapted you are, the more comfortable you are into tapping into long distance efforts.
Do you run on ketosis or not? You're not like ketosis guy.
It is not, I do not follow ketosis or keto diets or paleo diets for the fact that it's what the trend that I follow, let's call it, it's really not a trend. It's more like and Tim Noakes is one of the forefront experts in this.
Yeah,
You
that's great.
know, he kind of turned back all his knowledge and concepts that he put out there in the world like 2, 3, 4 decades ago. And nowadays, in the last 5, 10 years, he kind of turned back around and he started talking about OFM, optimized fat metabolism. So it's really not about cutting carbs completely off like in keto diets, but it's using carbs strategically. Complex carbs, so no sugars, no simple carbs, the complex good carbs used strategically when needed. So you're gonna be operating at a fat level. So your metabolism is gonna burn fat still. So you're adapted to burning fat. Your metabolic effort goes a long way burning fat, but you're still gonna have some carbs because eventually your muscles do need glycogen, still need carbs to process and to move. So it's almost like using gasoline on the muscles, but then your motor is operating on a fat level. So you have a much longer lasting and stable release of energy throughout.
Yeah. And then pre-race, what's the timing of your food? If you're running, say, what's standard like ultra distance for you? What's like typical? Those are two questions, I know, but just what's typical? That's just a short, whatever. But then like what's the lead up for
Yeah,
peak
well, I
consumption look like?
usually I tend to race in 100 milers or longer.
Okay.
So we're looking at efforts that go from 15 to 60 hours
Yeah.
and anywhere in between. Um, the amazing thing once you are fat adapted is that you don't need as much food.
Right.
Nowadays, I only eat twice a day. So I have like a cup of tea or sometimes coffee or matcha in the morning just to have a little warm something. And then I get out of the door and I usually can run anywhere in between 10, 15, 20 miles with no food, no water, nothing.
Yeah.
Come back home, have a nice meal, lunch, and then a very heavy dinner. And they're usually very much plant based with good sources of fats and a little protein. I'm really not stressing much about protein intake. The amazing part is really like kind of getting free of that eating pattern that we're used to. We've been raised for, in a way that we need to get up and eat right away, otherwise we're starving, and then mid-morning we need to have a snack, otherwise we cannot make it to lunch, and then we need to have a snack in the afternoon, otherwise we cannot make it to dinner, and then thankfully we'll go to sleep, otherwise we'll keep eating all night. And there's a constant necessity to kind of top off the tank, right?
Sure.
And here's because our the the nutritional direction that our society took in the last 20, 30, 40 years have been introducing more and more sugary stuff, simple carbs, stuff that are you know just massively loaded with sugars, cornstarch, prepared stuff, prepackaged stuff. It's all crap that really it just gives you a top off of energy, but then it leaves you with debilitating crashes afterwards because it's almost like throwing paper on fire. It
It's like
makes a
running.
big
It's like running on the ego.
yeah, exactly. It's a big flame, but it doesn't last long. Exactly. So it kind of really makes sense to me that once you tap into this OFM, optimized fat metabolism, you no longer have these big flames, but it's almost like putting a big log of fire that burns for hours and hours and hours on end. So whether you eat or not, you're still going to have enough sources on your body to get you going.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely fascinating in my opinion, because it kind of brings us back to our true physiology in the way that we actually evolved as human beings.
Yeah. Well, I so greatly appreciate the way that your mind operates. And
Well,
yeah,
it's been a
your
pleasure
brain.
to chat it out with you.
So I have not had the opportunity to read your book yet, and I'm really excited to read it. But can you get into just like who is it for, and that who is your before, and just like break it down, please, because I'm
Yeah.
so grateful to get more into your mind. So I
Well,
appreciate you giving us a resource to do that.
I really appreciate that. The book is very much for everyone that needs to they kind of feel trapped. I would say in where they are, that perhaps feel confined by their circumstances, that perhaps have bigger dreams but don't feel the courage, or they feel they are in a position to be able to go for it.
Yeah.
And of course, the stories are through running, but running is just a means to share deeper knowledge and deeper understanding of what our place in this world is ultimately. Whether you're a businessman or a runner or a cyclist or whatever, I think this book, what the message that I wanted to get out there is the fact that we can all transcend our perceived limitation, that it's not just for the allure of it, that we need to pursue something because we need to be successful, but there's a necessity to pursue something greater than ourselves, to be able to actualize ourselves, to grow as a person, and morph into a constantly better version of ourselves. And the just getting on in this journey will allow you to discover your strength and your abilities to pursue those dreams, and ultimately live a life worth living. So I hope that everyone reading this book will get a kick out of it, and will get out there and pursue their own vision. Doesn't matter how absurd or difficult it may seem at the beginning.
I appreciate you, man. Is there anything else before we wrap up you want to leave us with, or does this feel complete?
I feel it's been a wonderful conversation, and I thank you for the time
Yeah, of
to
course,
share
man.
some stories.
Yeah, man. Thank you. I felt like I was like around a campfire, hearing all legendary stories. All
All
right.
right,
Thank you,
man.
man. I appreciate you. Let me know if you pass through Austin, Tejas. And
Certainly will. Yeah. Thank you so much.
yeah, man. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thank you all for tuning in. Over now. Wow.